Okay. And we're going to have Abel Guadian, Tia Ruben's son, come up and say a few words.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming out. What I just want to talk about is a few memories that I have regarding my mother. A lifetime of memories, but some stick out. My first memory would be like back in 1960. We would go visit my grandmother, and I remember getting on a Continental Trailways bus, me and my mother, and we would get on that bus. And I thought that was great because that bus was nice and cool. It was air conditioned. It was so smooth riding. It was wonderful. It was great. One time we were doing that, and somehow or another, my first grade teacher, Mrs. Darby, I still remember her name, Mrs. Darby saw me getting on the bus. So I tried to hide behind my mother because I didn't want to get in trouble at school, because it was a school day and I was absent because I was with my mother going to visit my grandmother. So that's a memory that I have, and that's back around 1960. Another memory that I have is that we would go, when we lived in Childress, Texas, population 6,299, we would go shop in Lubbock and sometimes Amarillo and sometimes Wichita Falls. And on the way back from Lubbock to Childress, we didn't eat at restaurants like people do nowadays. We would eat under a tree. They'd buy some pressed ham, some bread, some mustard and mayonnaise, maybe tomatoes, and we would pull under a tree and we would have lunch. And then on the way back to Childress, we would turn north to go through Florida back to Childress, Texas, and we would pass a town called Rawls, Texas. And that's where my wife is from. So I did not know that my wife was living in that town. So this is like 1965. I got married in 1980. So I didn't know my wife was there. So we would turn there. So I passed by my wife's town many times, not realizing that was my future wife's hometown. So that's another memory that I have regarding that. Now moving on, I remember one time we went to San Antonio and we parked somewhere, and some young college-age kids parked next to my father's car. And when they exited their car, they banged my father's car with their door. And they all laughed about it. So my mother looks at him and she goes, I'll never forget, she looks at him, she goes, you think it's funny that you hit his car? And one guy goes, no ma'am, we don't think it's funny. And then she goes, then why are you laughing? And I saw that, I'm like, I'm not saying anything. So that's another memory that I have of my mother. Now, moving on to when we were here in Fort Worth, the thing that I remember about, one thing that really stands out is my younger son, Jonathan, was attending elementary school, we'll call it elementary school A. And that school was not a right fit for him. So he was always getting into the conflicts with school administration, and they would always suspend him. So I would ask my father and mother, I'd say, hey, can he stay over here? He's suspended for 2 days or whatever. And they would go, sure, yeah, of course. And then I would tell my mother, I would say, listen, he's not on vacation. He's been suspended. Don't let him watch TV. Don't let him do anything fun. This is a punishment. He's been suspended. Earlier this year, I found out that that's not what happened. They were taking him out places. They would go out shopping. He would go. They would go to eat. He would go. So he wasn't being punished. It was a good life for him when he was suspended over this. And that was kept from me up until like earlier this year. So that's another memory that I have of my mother. Regarding that same school situation, eventually the decision was made that we were going to move him to another school because he needed a fresh start. So luckily for us, there's a school down the street from my mother's house called Days of All Elementary. And we enrolled him there. And everything got so much better for us. And my mother and my father, they let him go over to wait for us after school. And they really helped us out a lot with that. It got to the point where the neighborhood kids would go to their house looking for my son, thinking that he lived there. But he didn't live there. We were just using that street address so he could go to school there. And then later I found out the principal knew all along. He knew he didn't live there. But because Jonathan, and I'm quoting, because he was a good student and he passed his STAR test, they let him stay. So that's another memory that I have of my mother. Now I guess one of the ways you can describe my mother is that she was a strong-willed person. She really had a strong will. And toward the end of her life, that strong will came out. What had happened is that previously to her passing on, she had issues with her back, and surgery was contemplated. The doctor said, well, now, at her age, she's taking a chance. She may not make it. But we all knew that mother would take that chance because her life, she would not live her life bedridden. She wasn't going to do that. She wasn't going to do that. So we went ahead and she made the decision that's what she wanted to do. And then that's when this sad process, I believe, began that eventually led to her passing. But I still support my mother's decision. I believe she made the right decision. Now, talking about her strong will, the last day of her life, may she rest in peace, people from hospice came over and wanted to make sure that we were telling the truth, I guess, or that she was really going to pass on. So they were doing an exam on her and stuff, and then sure enough, they decided that the time had come. But interestingly enough, my mom was not breathing, but she still had blood pressure. So they waited like 5 minutes, and they checked it again, and she still had blood pressure. So I'm kind of like, well, okay, right? So then, like, I will be honest with you. I am not a praying man. I am not a prayerful person. But I will admit that maybe there's been 4 or 5 times when I've actually felt the need to pray. And I will be honest with you, my prayers were answered. I've been lucky that way. I don't know if I should pray more, or it's because I don't pray so much that my prayers are granted. I don't know. They could look at it either way. But finally, when my mom was there and she still had blood pressure after about 10 minutes, I prayed that my mom would decide to go on because she was hanging on. That's just an example of her strong will. She wasn't breathing, but she still had blood pressure. So that is something that I will remember the rest of my life. But I will finish this with what I think is a rather humorous story. Now, I will warn you, this story contains profanity. If your kids have never heard cuss words before, cover their ears, okay? Because this story does contain cuss words. It was years ago. I must have been like 15, so that's how long ago it was. I must have been like 15 years old. We were up at the north side. We were at the Stockyards, and we were going somewhere, and we passed this railroad track, and the railroad track is still there, and it's still in the same condition. My father, bless his soul, he really took pride in his car. So he was always washing them, waxing them, all this stuff. And he drove like a senior citizen. You know what I mean? Right? So we're crossing this railroad track, and it's really bumpy. So my father's going like 3 miles an hour over this railroad track. 3 miles an hour, one tire at a time. And my mother gets exasperated. And here comes the profanity. She looks at him and she goes, Feliz, chingao, mejor apete, carga el carro. That's what she told him. And I still remember that. And that was like 50 years ago. So I remember that. I remember that vividly. So what I would like for you to think about is, like, she lived to be 92 years old. Up until like the last year of her life, she was going places, she was doing things. She had a sharp mind. She loved hamburgers from Griff's. She led a good life. But finally, you know what they say, Father Time never loses. Father Time never loses. And he won here. But she had a good life. And, I believe she's doing okay. I really believe that, because before she passed, she was saying that she had talked with grandmother, she had seen Tia Tere, she had seen my father, she had seen all these folks that had been gone for a while. So I believe that she's there, and it's like I told her, I'll be along shortly. So I want you to think about that. And again, I want to close by thanking you all for coming out. Do appreciate your thoughts and prayers. Thank you so much.